Right, Dave, here again. No dress,
Hello.
short hair.
Yes, I've had a bit of a trim. Thought I'd tidy up the office as
Yeah,
well. So there's no dancing costumes this time. I might be wearing a dress underneath the shirt, but I'm
that's
not going to
it.
go
That's it. You'll stand up and it'll be a full pleat going on.
there. I
So
just,
again, it's great. It's great that we can get together and sort of talk about this particular topic around ambiguity, because I'm sure there's plenty of it that's within both. Generally in people's minds at the moment, whether you're in work, whether you're out of work, whether you're going back to work, I'd imagine I imagine it's quite a big topic.
totally. And a few people have asked me, and I've overheard a few conversations and joined in some of the debates. Um, it's just, well, part of me thinks it's a mess, but then part of me goes, well, it's not a mess. The government have done things, and I'm sure we'll cover that in our
Yeah,
little
yeah,
chat in a bit. But it's just so difficult. It's so difficult. Where do
yeah.
you start? Is some of the starts. And if you're a big
Well,
company, you can probably absorb a lot. And if you're a small company, and they're the ones I really feel sorry for. Oh, I can't get people back in, or can I get people back in? And good old Boris says that you can do this, but stay at home and then go out and then don't go. So where do you go? So
yeah,
it is a challenging time. There's no
yeah.
two ways.
So just on that then, what do you think some of the challenges are then that companies are going to face when they're integrating their furloughed employees back into the business? Because that must be weird. That must be a weird scenario, especially for people who have remained in work and naturally for those that have been forced to be off.
Well, it's quite interesting because I've had a few conversations with shop workers just when I've dared to pop out and about with my face mask on, just preparing myself. Um, and and they're just going, I really enjoyed being on furlough. It was great. I was getting paid. I didn't have to do anything. I didn't have to worry, and I
Mm,
didn't want to come back. And that was the resounding message. I don't want to come back. I've had 3 months at home. My garden looks fantastic. I don't want to work.
yeah,
So from a business perspective, they've got not just the rules, the regulations, what they can do, what they can't do, how they treat their customers, how they treat their staff, the health and safety. Is it 2 meters? Is it 1 meter? Can we be inside? Can we be outside? They've then also got to worry about enticing the staff back because you can't just say, you must come back on this date. Government says 1st of August, we should all be getting back to work. Um, but it's going to be a cultural change. It needs quite a big uh, encouragement, organisational and cultural, to get the people back into the land of the work. And
yeah.
what is the land of the work now? It's different. Are we going to have people sitting 9 to 5 in offices? I don't know. I don't think
Mm,
so personally. But just if we just look at the retail side of it, you've got people checking you coming in, checking your temperatures, making sure you've got face coverings. And then the companies are going, well, I can't afford to keep you at home, so you're either going to come in and I pay you in, which means I won't get the furlough allowance. But on the positive, I do get a Brucey bonus of £1,000 if I keep you for Christmas. But am I going to get enough custom to make that worth my weight?
yeah,
It's really, really challenging. I'm looking at me personally. If I was going to go back into an office situation, I'd be quite nervous. Uh, how do I do it in the traditional way? You've got banks and banks of desks. Uh, that's definitely less than a meter. You're back to back. You're with people all the time. Do you have to wear a face covering? Or do you not? There's so many things from each individual's personal point of view. It is going to need a change program running to
mm,
bring the people back.
yeah. And do you think? I mean, considering the volume of people that will work in offices, do you think that they'll? Well, I mean, how do you think they'll utilise the space of offices now? I mean, because there's plenty of ways that you could. We don't need to use it in a traditional way anymore, I suppose. So what's your view on that?
I think the problem is that most companies have invested a heck of a lot into their office. It's their bastion of the workplace. This is where everybody's seen to be, and seeing is believing. Although the last few months, people have learned to, I'm going to say, relax a little bit in terms of allowing people to work where they can remotely. Although I have heard stories where people have had to have enhanced spyware put on their system to make sure that every 10 minutes or every 20 minutes, the camera takes a picture to make sure that they're at their desk. And that's horrible. I would not like to work in that kind of thing. It needs to be a trust.
Yeah.
But from an office perspective, people will now, companies will be looking, going, do I need this much space? When is our rates up? When is our rent up? Have I paid for this building? Who's going to buy this building? If you have got the ownership of the building, then you need to look at some creative ways of using it. And I think offices need to evolve from banks and banks and banks of cubicles or workspaces into a more collaborative zones, just to try and get people together to have discussions and open meetings. So it's not an enclosed type meeting room. You need that bigger space so that you can still adhere to the COVID principles. It might be as much as a traditional office that might have had 1,000 people in. You might only get 250. You might get 25% in there. Now that means, what do I do with the other 75%? What do I do, and when do I have to go into the office? We need to think differently as leadership as to how I want my people to work. Where can they work? Can they work from home? Can they work from home all the time? Can it be a hybrid model so you're in when you need to be? If I look back in my dim and distant past when I was doing software engineering, coding, I could have done that from anywhere. But the rule was you have to be seen to be working. You still need that collaboration. You still need that get-together time. And I think the officers need to look at what they do. If I look at Google or somewhere like that, they've already started to think like that. And they've already taken a brave step and said, we don't want anybody back before Christmas. So it is quite interesting. If the office space needs to be transformed and redesigned into what do we need rather than just volume. I think the days, for example, of call centres with 5,000 people in a building. For me, I just think we've proved that's not needed.
I think that presenteeism is, I think, is a massive subject in itself. To be fair, and it's one that I'm sure companies will have to give a great deal of sort of thought to, especially, and it'd be interesting to hear your thoughts on this when they've got to think about sort of, balancing the books and those overheads, because I know you've already touched on it, haven't you, with regards to rates and things like that. So I mean, what are the considerations around that? Because there's two blocks, I suppose, isn't there? You've got till the end of this calendar year, and there's certain things I imagine that you've got to have a return on investment. And that has to be seen. And then you've got a plan for sort of next year. Oh, and then we've got a small thing of Brexit thrown into the equation as well, I suppose. So it's just...
Oh, you should get fined for mentioning the B word.
I know,
putting Brexit to one side, because that's another can of worms. I think a lot of companies are probably going to have to a degree, just write off this year as an exceptional.
Right.
What that means, well, small, medium companies, that could mean that they go under because they can't sustain. And the government have provided some assistance, but they can't sustain. The larger corporates, they can probably just go, we'll suck it up and we'll squeeze it back, because we know that in the next 6 to 12 months, 18 months, the digital transformation is going to have to happen. All the companies need to look at their organization, their operating model, look at where they do the people, what they do with the people. As I said, Google are working at home, and they've got massive campuses. So what is the value of getting the people into the office? From a purely economic footprint, somebody who's invested in that asset, they need to be looking, making it better use of space, looking at probably, can I get rid of some of the space? Can I share it with other people? if you look at Teams as an example, people might have invested in an auditorium, new features that are coming on Microsoft Teams. It's going to give you this auditorium view. So do you need that big space? You could change that to something else, but it's going to need an investment. And for these small, medium companies, that could cripple them. That really could cripple them. And I really feel for them. But I think what people need to be doing is just not reacting quickly. They need to take a deep breath in, step back and go, right, let's look at how we work today. Let's look at what COVID has done, and let's look at how we think we need to work better, because this might happen again. Let's look at our business continuity. Let's look at how we operate, and can we make it more effective? Because we know, on the whole, unless you've got to be hands-on manufacturing, and that's a different ball game. But if you look at people with laptops, can work pretty much anywhere as long as they've got an internet connection. Are they being productive? We need to think about outcomes. We shouldn't be thinking about you're at your desk, time your presenteeism, as you said. That's got to go. You've got to get trust. If you haven't got a team that you trust, you haven't built a culture that you trust each other, that company's going to fail anyway, personally. So it needs people to be brave. And if I was CIOs right now, I'd be looking at going, the next 6 to 18 months, I've got to do something quite drastic to support my business. And the business needs to support them in achieving that, which probably means digital transformation.
Yeah. So, and thinking about what you're saying about smaller sort of or medium-sized organisations, then do you feel that there's enough sort of capacity within these companies then to consider some of the sort of government initiatives that are on offer now? Because there's, without sort of, I'm not going to get political in it, but there has been, pretty useful packages for businesses to kind of take advantage of, and there will continue to be, I would imagine, into the future. But I mean, is that something that smaller companies perhaps need to think about?
Well, I think that's a bit of a double-edged sword. I think Rishi Sunak, and I'm not being political at all here, I think he's done a good job in terms of, he said, this is what we're going to do, and we're going to lay out all these measures. Great. It's proactive. But if you look at a small to medium company, they've got maybe 50, 100, 500 people. Have they got the resources to bring those people back to start looking at all these government opportunities and incentives? Have they got the wherewithal? Because as soon as you start bringing them back, they've got to come off furlough. Because remember, furlough, even though we've seen various cases where furloughed people are still working, you should not be working. So the funding will change, and it makes it challenging. If you go back to that Brucey bonus that I was talking about earlier, and I apologise for calling it Brucey bonus, but it sounds good on the face of it. If you keep those furloughed people employed in your organisation till the new year, you'll get £1,000 a head, which is great on the face of it. But I've got to make it to that point in time. Can my organisation survive? If you look at the directors of companies, directors have been struggling because they haven't been able to furlough, or they haven't been able to claim any funding. So it's been quite challenging for those guys. So it's incredibly difficult. And if they then have got to start funding, bringing back their team, it's difficult. The large companies will be fine. They'll, like I said, they'll suck it up. They'll write it off. It's a bad year. Some of the incentives as well, even if you do find something and you've invested that time, you might not be eligible. Ultimately, you might have to pay it back. And that would worry me, being a small to medium sized company owner, going, that's great. I can cover everything. I can get this loan, but I've got to pay it back. And at the minute, I don't know when or if I'll be able to pay it back. Because it's so difficult. If you get grants, well, that's good. But again, is that grant going to be enough to sustain you till Christmas, and hopefully the businesses start to pick up?
Yeah, it's true. So, and because the situation, there is so much ambiguity, I suppose, involved in all of this. What would you say is the required sort of agility, if you like, to set a strategic focus and then continue to set ongoing sort of goals, really, because I imagine it's small bite-sized chunks, I would imagine, but I don't know, what do you think?
No, totally. I think, as you can see from the way that the COVID situation has evolved over the last 3 months, things change weekly, sometimes daily, as to what you can and can't do. I think organisations need to transform themselves to be nimble and agile. Now, I'm an agile fan. I think the key thing that we need to think about is how you organise your business differently. Historically, your medium to large, they're siloed, very siloed. There's finance, there's design, there's development, there's manufacturing, there's purchasing. We need to try and cut across that and start to look at agile teams that work together. So you might have representation from all of those areas, where you can then start to make decisions quickly. You can start to make products quickly. You can start to change direction quickly if you need to. Traditional workflows where you go, I've got to send this to approval to finance then send it off to manufacturing to approve, manufacturing approve it, goes back to finance then send it back. That can take weeks sometimes. Even if you get hold of a piece of paper in the good old days and you wander around and go, please sign that, that was quicker. It needs that team to be a composite team, focused on a particular outcome, product, and drive that forward, which would probably scare the dickens out of quite a few CEOs, etc., about we cannot possibly operate like that. But teams are starting to evolve in that way, and you can start small, start to build it up. But it is an organisational culture change, and I think that agility would give people the focus. I know myself, if I had a multidisciplined team that I go, I've got full control over this, I've got full decision-making authority, away I go, I'm not going to get stuck. Whereas if I know I'm relying on outside influences, that people always have different motivations and political angles, you've got to try and get through that. And for big companies, that cultural change is going to be very difficult. Your medium to large need to be the ones that evolve though. And I think they can. I really think they can. Use the partnerships as well. There's so many different partnerships that you have, whether it's an IT service provider, procurement, manufacturing and engineering. Got to use those partnerships more, get them part of that agile team so they can go on the journey. It might mean that some of the contracts, of course, that you've got in place don't work anymore. So that might be a good time to take a step back and go, well, what do we need to do? Is it still the right partner to use? So there's lots of variables. There's no quick win. But I think you can start to demonstrate it small steps. You go, let's look at this little product here. If I start to build an agile team and empower them, let's just see whether it starts to work and see whether culturally it's going to work. You may have the wrong people in the organization to do it, which again is another difficult question. But
well, you can see how you can get to that conclusion as well by sort of just asking yourself that, you know, how have we got to this point in time, and how whether it's you're looking at your competition or you just from a leadership perspective, you just look around you and you use all your senses, don't you, to gauge that we need to be more. We need to mobilise ourselves from a technological perspective. We need to be. We need to engage remote talent in order to get projects delivered. But ultimately, I think the mindset needs to be, as you've highlighted there, is around building exceptional project delivery teams. And you can do that through, as you've already highlighted, a number of different channels, whether it's through partnerships or third parties or your own internal resource. But you can actually put that outreach into your, if you like, your ecosystem it doesn't need to have any boundaries when you're working in that sort of agile way that enables you to work through collaborative tools, and you can sort of, you know, get the right level of engagement. You've got the right resources because you're the one that's kind of charged with delivering it all.
Totally. And I think the collaborative tools that are out there, the IT world has exploded over the last 6 months. The last 3 months, Zoom has gone mad. Teams, as Microsoft Teams has been shaken up. Google Meet has been shaken up because they've seen this big competitor just evolve.
Yeah.
But there's all other collaboration tools that we can use from a software engineering perspective or a computer-aided design perspective and automotive engineering. There's a lot of things. Virtualization, for example, could be used. So if you've got to protect your data and your IP, then a lot of companies can start adopting virtualization. So you might have a laptop, but the actual nothing's stored on it. So it's secure, it's safe.
Yeah.
And we can't forget security because there's been a lot of scams happening over COVID. And when people are remote working, it is a big risk, but it's not impossible. And there's enough people out there to make sure that you've got a secure environment.
Yeah.
It's balancing risk and reward and efficiency and output. It's a challenging time. It really is. But it's also quite an interesting time because it could really accelerate even further the development of projects and businesses. My focus is project program delivery, and I look at it in terms of there's some good stuff that could go on here. Companies just need to be brave.
Yeah.
And I think don't react by just getting rid of people. I think you need to take that deep breath and get somebody in and have a discussion about what you could do. And then just get a bit of a roadmap around, well, let's start on these steps. Head towards Agile. Agile doesn't have to be click, it's working tomorrow. I think you just need to be ready if something like this comes again, or indeed we're going to be with this for the next 12 months and there's risk of a spike because of winter, etc. Just get yourself ready. Let's put some small steps in place to make sure that we stabilize.
Yeah, no, it's really, really insightful. Thank you very much for sharing your views on this. I know it's naturally a challenging time for everybody, but the ultimate message is, you know, but not only be safe, but sort of be brave and be bold, and see what comes of it.
Be brave, be bold, be strong.
Yes.
No, I think it is. It's good. It is a difficult time, and it's difficult for everybody. And I have my deepest sympathy with everybody. But I think from a business to survive, you need to be a little bit selfish, and you need to go, this is what I need to do to survive. And there's no harm in talking to all your suppliers and your partners to say, look, we've got to work smarter here. What can we do? And they will be having the same internal thoughts about their business as well. So collaborate straight away.
Yeah. So on that note, any comments, please share, get back in touch, and let's keep the conversation going. But for now, Dave, thank you so much again.
Thank you very much, sir. I'll see you again soon.
Yeah, all the best. Bye.